good morning. So if you were with us last week, which was our first message of this new year, you heard that we kind of doing something different the first half of this year. Instead of picking a weekly topic and then discussing a series of Bible verses to support it, we kind of flipped it on its head, and we're in a process of picking a weekly verse, one verse, and then diving into that verse a little deeper. And as I gave credit last week, I went through a Bible study through the YouVersion Bible app that kind of listed these 30 most what they called famous or significant verses in the Bible. And we just go through them every week, one by one. And we started last week in the beginning with Genesis 1:1. Today we're going to flip ahead a couple chapters. And we're going to the book of Exodus, chapter 14, verse 14, and the verse of the week reads, "The Lord will fight for you. You need only to be still." Now, this verse is an important verse to me. It has some personal meaning. It's actually the wallpaper on my phone. So every day when I have to look at my phone, I see that verse, "Be still, be still." And it reminds me, and if you're like me, so many times we get in a hurry every day. We're constantly on our phones, making a call, doing a text, looking up an email, trying to solve a problem, and we feel compelled that we have to do everything through our own strength. And we also, for some odd reason, feel like everything has to be done in a hurry. We're always in a hurry, not sure where we're going, or what being in a hurry is going to accomplish, but we're always in a hurry to fix something so we can get to the next problem and fix it, and so on and so on. So why is this verse so famous? Well, this verse is known to be a very favorite verse for people who are facing anxiety, fear, or uncertainty in their lives. So we got anybody listening today that you're a little anxious about something? Maybe you're a little scared about something going on or something coming up in your life, or you're just a little unsteady, not sure. Well, then this verse and this message is for you. The verse reminds us, it's a powerful reminder that you're not alone in the battle. Now, "the Lord will fight for you. You need only be still," was uttered by Moses. And when we think about Moses, we think about the Ten Commandments. And we see Charlton Heston, right? And we see him through that movie. And that movie was released in 1956. So that movie is having its 70th year anniversary this year. And in that movie, we have to remember there was no computers, there was no AI, but the movie's known for its special effects. And if you're born like me in the 1900s, you can probably appreciate some of the special effects. But if you were born in this century and you can't remember the 1900s, you might watch it and go, "Well, what's so special about that?" And one of the best special effects scenes the movie is known for is the parting of the Red Sea. And in this, we see this ocean, we see Moses with the staff, the people are gathered on the shore, and it starts as it's calm in the background, and then if you look at it frame by frame, it'll go away from, they'll go back to him. You see the second frame, some waves and wind, and his hair is starting to blow. Then it goes back to some people, it comes back to him, and there's darkness and clouds, and the waves are clashing. And you ultimately are led to the scene where the water separates and is standing in two columns, and there's dry land for the people of Israel to walk through. The way they shot that, they had no special effects, was they actually took an Olympic-sized swimming pool and had two glass walls that held this water back. And that's what you see when they're walking through it. And then what they did is they broke the glass in the back and allowed the water to crash and crush and come forward. But you're saying, wait a minute, when I see it on TV, the water parts backwards. What they did was they filmed the crashing scene and then they played it backwards. They spliced the film frame by frame and ran it backwards to give the appearance of water parting. I just thought that was kind of a cool fact. Has nothing to do with the verse. So back to the verse. Short explanation of the verse. Now this moment when Exodus 14:14, when Moses quotes this verse, it happens right after God has freed his people out of slavery in Egypt. The Israelites had been slaves in Egypt for 400 years. And sometimes we kind of gloss over that number, 400 years. But think about if you were a child born in that first year of slavery. You would have been born, had your own kids, become a parent, become a grandparent, maybe a great-grandparent. And that cycle was repeated many generations over for 400 years. The vast majority of the people only knew one thing: bondage and slavery. But 400 years later, God's made the arrangements and he's put Moses in place and he's leading the people out of Egypt. And when they leave, they have to cross a desert and a wilderness because they're headed to the promised land. But they end up wandering in the promised land for 40 years. And sometimes we gloss over 40 years. And I thought about it. If you're a young boy, and let's say you were born towards the end of that period of slavery, let's say at the time you're leaving, you're 20 years old. You're a 20-year-old, young, vibrant, strong man. All you've known your whole life is slavery. You've been working in the mud pits since at least age 10. So as soon as you were old enough to walk and move, you've been cranking out bricks to build that Egyptian empire. And now you're 20 and you're finally free and you can't wait to go live your life. And you spend the next 40 years wandering in the wilderness, wandering around without seeing the promised land. And you've come to this point in the Bible where you're now standing at the Red Sea and you can see across and the promised land's on the other side, and you're a 60-year-old man. The prime of your life was spent wandering in the wilderness. But you've been through the test. You've been through the trials. You've been faithful. You've fallen back, and the people stumbled during that 40 years, but God always provided. And now they're at their moment. But they quickly find themselves trapped. They're pressed between the sea and a hostile army that's now pursued them. Imagine the panic, the hopelessness, and the terror that they felt. There were 600 Egyptian chariots, the greatest army on the face of the earth at that time, had decided, you know what, letting them go, it wasn't such a great idea. That's free labor, let's go get them. And if you've been wandering in the desert for 40 years and you just can't wait to get to the other side, maybe this is a picture of your life. You spent years in bondage. You've been addicted to something. You've been struggling with sin. And God's finally led you away from that. But you've been struggling and kind of wondering and falling back and forth. But God always shows up. And you're at that point of breakthrough. And you can see God's promise on the other side. You can see the end of of your addiction. You can see you've been fighting for your marriage, your health, your finances. And you see that you've put the work in, you've had faith, and there you are, and all of a sudden, the very thing you left, your past, is now pursuing you. It's coming to pull you back. In Exodus chapter 14, let's back up a few verses. In Exodus 14, verses 10, as Pharaoh approached, the Israelites looked up, and there were the Egyptians marching after them. They were terrified and cried out to the Lord. Now, we've all been there. We've been going through something, a rehab, a recovery. We're trying to, here we are January 14th. We got New Year resolutions. We're trying to leave some baggage from the past behind. And we're really working hard. It's been a struggle. And all of a sudden, our past shows back up to haunt us. And what do as humans? We complain. We whine. We cry out to the Lord. And it goes on to say, the Israelites, they said to Moses, was it because there were no graves in Egypt that you brought us to the desert to die? What have you done to us by bringing us out of Egypt? Didn't we say to you in Egypt, leave us alone, let us serve the Egyptians? It would have been better for us to serve the Egyptians than to die in the deserts. How many times in our lives, as we try to move forward and do what's right, do we feel ourselves being pulled back? It gets too hard. The challenge is too great. And it's easier to just go back and live the life we were, to just fall back to the routine and what was comfortable. They were in this spot at this very moment, trapped between an army and a sea. And in Exodus, the next chapter, 14:13, right above our verse of the day, Moses responds to the people. Moses answered the people, do not be afraid. There's that phrase. 365 times in the Bible, once for every day. Here's one of them. Do not be afraid. Stand firm, and you will see the deliverance the Lord will bring you today. The Egyptians you see today, you will never see again. Moses called his shot. That's pretty cocky. You know, you see a baseball player get to home plate, and they take the bat, and they point to the stands, right? They're calling their shot. They're going to hit the home run. Maybe Moses took his staff and called his shot. He's telling them, your past, the problems, the sin, the burdens, the things that held you back, stand firm. Don't be afraid. You're not going to see them today. Then Moses tells them something that surprised them. Our verse of the week, the Lord will fight for you. You need only to be still. In a moment of total chaos, the people are told to trust, not to strategize, not to run, not to get their swim gear on and start swimming. Don't grab a bunch of sticks and rocks. We're going to fight this army. But to be still and watch what God does. So that begs a question. What do you do when you panic or get nervous? Anybody out there ever get panicked over a situation? It just seems like there's chaos all around you. You're trying to get to a certain date, point of time, and it's just one obstacle after another. And right in the middle of the chaos, you decide, I'm going to panic. Yeah, I'm going to get nervous. And your mind starts to run, and it spirals downward. One domino effect after another. Everything that could potentially go wrong. And what do you tell yourself? Oh, I got to fix it myself. And not only do I have to fix it, I got to fix it now. I'm in a hurry. I'm in a hurry. Or do you ever reflect on this verse and take the advice that Moses gave him? Do you ever just be still? Pause, reflect for a moment about all the other times God's delivered you, and you just be still and pray. See, the verse is not saying we should never act, but it is saying we don't have to carry every burden alone. Sometimes the most faithful thing you can do is pause, breathe, and remember who's really in charge. You see, the Israelites, it wasn't like they had done nothing. By faith, they loaded up a caravan of wagons and people. And if you think about this caravan, you've got sick and elderly, and you got women, and you got pregnant ladies, you got small children, you got a whole range of people in this huge caravan and beat up wagons, and they got nothing. By a step of faith, they stepped out of Egypt. They acted. They did what God called them to do. For 40 years, They try to follow God's wills, and as hard as that much as we stumble and fall back, they continue to be faithful and move forward till they got to the point where they'd reached the limit of their own strength. And that's when God steps in and takes over. And what's really interesting is here's the ocean, here's the army. Oh my gosh, what are we going to do? And in the very verse after our verse of the week, God speaks. In verse 15, then the Lord said to Moses, why are you crying out to me? Tell the Israelites to move on. And sometimes we kind of need that blunt. We cry. God hears us. He sees our tears. He feels our pain, our anxiety. But then he says, that's enough. Stop crying, my child. Move forward and trust. I've got this. Now, the ocean has not parted yet, and God's saying, move forward. So you have to take another step of faith. The water's still there, but this is a slow-moving caravan. Some of these people ain't moving real quickly. It's going to take a long time for them to cross. But God says, move forward. And what the people didn't see is God went first. He was already at the water's edge because He will fight for you. And some battles aren't yours to fight anyway. And as we continue to read the story, if you go down to Exodus 14:19, then the angel of God, who had been traveling in front of the Israelites, withdrew and went behind them. You're like, wait a minute. So God tells us to move. His Spirit's already went ahead. He's preparing the water. And right when we get there, He withdrew. Well, see, He went behind them and placed Himself between the army and their past and their burdens and their sins, because God's always got your back. And then here comes the miracle. Then Moses, in verse 21, then Moses stretched out his hand over the sea, and all the night the Lord drove back the sea with strong east wind and turned it into dry land. The waters were divided, and the Israelites went through the sea on dry ground, with a wall of water on their right and their left. You see, the Israelites were standing in the middle of a miracle, and this may be a picture of your life right now. You're trying to leave your past. You're trying to get to somewhere that God wants you to be. Chaos is all around you. We just have to stop and cry out to God. And then we have to follow His voice to move on. We have to trust that He's going to make the way and that He's going to stand behind us and have our backs. What could this verse mean to you? When life feels out of control, you don't have to hold it all together. Take a breath. God is with you, and your story's not over yet. These people were in bondage. And whatever you may feel like has had you in bondage may be bearing down on you today. And I encourage you to reflect on this verse throughout your day. The Lord will fight for you. You need only to be still. What are you facing today? Just name it. And be still for a brief moment today and take it to God. What's giving you anxiety? What may be putting stress on your life? You have a decision. You can go back to where you came from, or you can move forward in a step of faith, because your blessing is on the other side of whatever you're facing today. And we have to remember, God did not remove the problem. He walked them right through it. God didn't make the ocean disappear, evaporate. He didn't remove the problem. He made a way to take them through the problem. So pray the hardest whenever it's the hardest to pray. Then let go and trust God. And you only need to be still. So as we wrap up here today, the story reminds us of God's faithfulness. They'd been through a lot. They were at the big moment, and God's not going to quit on them now. They just had to step forward in faith. And to do that, they had to pause and be still. See, God had done it before, and God's going to do it again. He did it for them, and He'll do it in our lives. And I read something this week, and it made me think of this verse because God had done it before, 900 years before the Red Sea, in the story of Noah and the great flood. You see, in Genesis chapter 6, we know that Noah's building an ark because God's getting ready to bring the storm of all storms and flood the earth to rid it of the evilness and corruptness that had entered the world. But He's going to save those who are good. And it's a foreshadowing and a parallel also of the coming of Jesus. But in Genesis 6, God gives very detailed blueprints and instructions on how to build this ark. He tells the type of wood, the length, the height, the measurements, the descriptions, the pitch, which is the tar that goes inside the hull to keep the water out. Every detail of this boat, this ship, is described in such detail. But God left out one critical component. Nowhere in that description is a steering wheel, a rudder, a sail, much less an engine. Noah was building a massive vessel to survive a storm, but he had zero control over it or over where it went. He couldn't steer it away from rocks. He couldn't turn it into the waves. He couldn't aim for dry land. He was completely at the mercy of the water. The ark was not designed for navigation. The ark was designed for floating. Noah's job was to be a passenger. God never asked him to be the captain. God was the captain. That might be another picture of your life right now. You're in this ark called life amongst the storm and the waves, and you want to steer and control this ship. We have to remember, God never asked us to be the captain. He asked us to be a passenger and go along on the ride with Him. You're trying to put a steering wheel in a situation that God simply wants you to float through. So as we leave here today, ponder and reflect on Exodus 14. Verse 14. The Lord will fight for you. You need only to be still. Have a blessed day, and we'll see you next week.